Hi, I'm Ginny Rosenkrantz with the University of Maryland Extension, and it's November. Lots of times November can be gloomy, nasty, cold days, but sometimes it can be bright bluebird days, lots of sun, and it's just tempts you to get out in the garden. Don't hesitate, get out in the garden. There's a lot of really cool things to do. So I want you to join me while we go ahead and look at some of the things you can plant, some of the garden chores that aren't that difficult, and then we can go ahead and show you how we're going to plant this really pretty container with spring flowering bulbs and pansies. A lot of people think that if you plant pansies in the fall, they're not going to come up again. Well, in the fall, they're going to give you lots of flowers, and as it gets colder, they're going to get really, really small, but they'll continue to bloom as long as you have a couple of days of above 30-degree temperatures, in the 40s, something like that. Then they'll have lots of flowers. But come springtime, oh my goodness, they're going to bloom like crazy. So we're going to have a lot of pansies in this container, and we're going to have a lot of spring bulbs. So join us for Delmarva Gardens, coming up next right here on Pack 14. You know, sometimes November days can be dreary, but sometimes you get a bright bluebird day like we have here. And one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this beautiful plant right here is that a lot of people don't associate November with blooming flowers. Well, this is what they call a fall blooming camellia, and they're absolutely spectacular. This one's called Bonanza. It's kind of a reddish pink, and it will continue to bloom until a really, really nasty cold frost. And it's spectacular. You have single petal flowers, double petal flowers. When the flowers are done, they fall on the ground, so you have this wonderful mulch of bright pink petals. And as you see, it has a lot of buds that are still maturing, I should say. And like I said, until you have a really, really nasty frost, this will continue to bloom. I've had this one blooming even as late as Christmas. And it's kind of fun to be able to go outside and bring in holly and spruce and pine for Christmas, but it's also fun to be able to bring in something like a beautiful fall blooming camellia, because the flowers last a little bit inside too. So if you're thinking about, should I do anything in my garden? Absolutely. And this is still an excellent time to be out there planting trees and shrubs, because for the most part the trees are losing a lot of their leaves. This is an evergreen, so it's never going to lose its leaves unless it dies, and I'm not going to let it die. But this is a great time to be planting, because the roots will go ahead and get firmly established into the soil, and come springtime it will have a jump start on growing, and it'll be able to do much better. Springtime is a good time to plant too, but I really like to do fall. So let me show you some other things we can do in a fall garden. Right in front of me I have some daylilies, and these are semi-evergreen, which means that as long as the temperatures stay warm, this is going to stay nice and green. A lot of daylilies will go ahead at the first frost, go yellow and then dead, and at that point you should clean them all up. The semi-evergreen ones, though, you can go ahead and leave, because they do add a little bit of structure in your garden. The only thing that you would need to do would be pick out the old flower stalks, which are kind of cool, and just remove them from the garden. Put them in a wheelbarrow and compost them. Let me show you some other things you can do in the garden. As I walk through here, I look around and I see what's on the ground. I have a lot of greenery right down here, and at the beginning it kind of looks like it might be weeds, but these are actually delphinium, and they've actually gotten started from little seeds that were sown last summer, and they remain dormant because they don't like heat. So they went dormant in the heat, and then they went ahead and started to germinate when it got a little bit cooler, and they're going to get to be about 1 foot high. Now this, of course, is a dandelion, and this is the kind of thing that you do want to go ahead and pull out. Now if I just rip this out, I'm just going to go ahead and take the top off. I'm not going to take care of the roots. I need the roots, so I'm going to go ahead and actually dig under until I actually get the root out. There we go. This is a perennial weed. Look at that root system. It's really long, really deep. So if I just cut this off, this whole root system would have a lot of energy, and it could put up more green leaves. So when you have a root system like this, you need to pull out the entire thing. Since we just had that hurricane with all that rain, the ground is very, very easy to work in. So this is the perfect time to be out there digging out the things you want to get out. Let me show you what else we have here in the garden. I'll just put this over here for the time being. I have some lilies that have finished blooming, and like the daylily, the stalks are done, so I could go ahead and just collect all of these in a pile and then come by with a wheelbarrow and pick them all up. Easy, easy peasy. Back here, this is a peony. And it doesn't look really good right now. Peonies have a tendency to look really beautiful in the springtime when they have gorgeous flowers. These are a plant that likes to live in the far north. They're thrilled to live in Maine, Upper New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, that kind of stuff. Here they survive. They don't mind the cold, they just don't like the heat as well. So what happens is they end up getting, sometimes they get a disease called measles, which is not the kind of measles we get, but it's a disease that affects the foliage. And the other thing that it gets, whereas you see right here, is that it just gets heat scorch so badly. So what I need to do is come back here and actually prune this all down and just remove it. The reason why I would want to cut it down, I'm going to leave about an inch stalk, but the reason why I would want to cut it down is if there's disease here, and I can tell that there is, you can see this particular leaf has got some brown spots right here. These are the measles I was talking about. These disease spots right here, if I leave it here, I'm just going to give the disease a fresh chance to just jump on the peony when it comes up in the springtime. By removing it, it's going to have to get the spores from all over. And the spores are around. I mean, that's how the funguses live. They're in the air. But I can go ahead and get rid of a huge inoculation by just removing this and just, you know, putting it in the compost pile and getting rid of it that way. Okay, behind me is this gorgeous crepe myrtle. This is the Natchez. I love crepe myrtles. They give you tons of flowers. These are the berries or the seeds. And some people like to prune out the seeds. I don't mind leaving them the way they are. As they mature, I notice in the wintertime the cardinals eat them. But this one needs a little bit of pruning. Come on in, let me show you what I've got in here. I have this beautiful crepe myrtle with this gorgeous exfoliating bark. But I also have all this stuff right here that I need to prune out. And I'm really just like, oh, chomping at the bit to get to this. But crepe myrtles are a very southern plant. And if you try to do any pruning in the fall, you can actually kill the plant. I think you can do a little bit of pruning, but anything that, for instance, getting rid of all the little stuff that I have down here, that would be considered major pruning. And I don't want to risk this plant. I love it. It's really a beautiful, well-established plant. I'm not going to touch it. So what I'm going to have to do is wait. And as a gardener, that's really hard. But wait until springtime comes and the new foliage begins to come out. At that point, I can come in and prune up all the things that I need to prune up with this, raise this up a little bit so that I can see the beautiful exfoliating bark, and get rid of the little branches right here that really are not adding anything to the plant. It had a few flowers, but it's so shaded, it really doesn't add anything to the architecture of the plant. So I have to put that on my calendar, on my to-do list. Okay, let me show you something else in my garden that looks spectacular in the fall because even though it doesn't have flowers, or even leaves eventually, it's got gorgeous berries. Come on. This is the American Beautyberry, and it has the type of arching habit that's spectacular. It comes up from the ground, it arches over. In the early summertime, it's covered with little teeny, very, very tiny white flowers. You almost miss them, but come fall, the flowers turn into these spectacular berries. We've got some here, and they're almost an amethyst purple. They're beautiful. Right now we have the foliage still on, but when it gets cold and the foliage leaves, we'll have these spectacular berries. And they'll stay on through most of the winter. Aren't they gorgeous? I love them. The other thing is when you're thinking about winter and thinking about your garden, one of the things you want to do is plant some perennials that are going to give you some color even in the wintertime. Let me show you what I've got in my garden right over here. These are the dianthus. We planted some of these last month. And as you see that they've kind of finished blooming, they have all the little flower stalks that are still there, so we could go ahead and clean those up if we had to or had the time to do it. But this is what it looks like in the fall. It makes a nice little mound. Dianthus is a type of carnation, and this one actually has a little blossom over here. This is what I love about the firewitch. It keeps on blooming. Not much of a flower, but still, it's there, and I do love that. Now these guys over here, they're going to die back in the ground. This is the Indian blanket flower, and the lilies, these are going to die back to the ground too. But I will have enough green in the garden so that even in the middle of the nastiest weather, if I don't have any snow cover, I'll have something that's really, really pretty. You know, we did have that hurricane, and I have some things over here that I want to show you. One of the things that the hurricane did was fix a lot of these dead limbs on my branches of the trees. So I have a lot of dead limbs that need to be picked up before I do any kind of yard work. Let's see, this is still alive up here. That looks good. So what you need to do is swing by, pick up all the little sticks and that sort of thing. If you leave them lying on the grass, it's going to smother the grass, and they do need to be picked up. So just pull them all into a wheelbarrow. This is really good for composting. So you can either chip them or put them in a pile all by themselves, or if you feel like you need to take them somewhere else, you could certainly do that too. But now there's some that are going to be a little bit more difficult to get to. I have a big one behind me, and I looked at it, and it's going to need 2 people to take care of that one. So I'm going to leave that one there for a little bit longer. I want to show you some other things in my garden, though, that you need to do. You know, the other thing you need to do in the fall is to rake all the leaves that are off of your grass. Now, I don't have perfect lawn. What I have is green, and that's good for me. But whether I had a perfect lawn or not, one of the things you need to do definitely is get all the leaves off the lawn. The reason why is, well, the grass needs the sunlight for it to grow, and it grows all year long. It has a tendency in this area to go dormant a little bit in the summertime simply because the heat. Anything over 95, people stop doing a lot of things fast, and grass actually stops growing at 95. At least the cool season grass does. But if you leave the leaves on the lawn in the wintertime, in the fall, you're actually going to smother it. That's not a good thing. Let's go back down into the garden too, though, because I want to show you something else that we've got here. This is my little annual garden where I have a lot of summer color. And I have these beautiful begonias out here that are still showing a lot of color and foliage despite the hurricane. But in front of me, I have some stuff here that looks very nasty. All it has is a couple of sticks and all. These were impatiens, and this is not dead because of the hurricane or because of the cold. This is dead because on the underside of the leaf there was a fungus called downy mildew on this, and it wiped out the entire plant. So what I'm going to have to do is dig this plant up and get rid of it. I could probably compost it, but this is, if I leave it here and I don't clean it up, the spores from this plant are going to continue to blow a lot in the area. Now, there are spores in the soil, and they're going to last there. We don't know how many years they're going to last. So if you have impatiens that have been planted in the shade and they didn't look all that good this summertime, you probably had downy mildew on the impatiens. Downy mildew does attack impatiens, both the regular impatiens and the New Guinea impatiens. It also attacks coleus, which is, again, a shade-loving plant. So my suggestion is, instead of looking for impatiens, look to see a couple of other different kinds of plants, including something like this begonia, which will give you a lot of summer color. This has got pretty red flowers. You can get them in pink flowers. You can get them with white flowers. So begonias are a good choice, and there's a lot of other plants, too, that we could look into. Let me show you some plants that are going to survive throughout the winter and that'll look really pretty in the springtime. You know, mint is one of those things that you sometimes have to corral. This is lemon balm, so when you pick it, it has a wonderful lemon fragrance, which I truly love. But this has a tendency to really escape, so I've got to be really on the ball and keep this contained. When we had the hurricane, the shrub behind me, the viburnum behind me, really protected it, so it was able to hunker down with all the winds. It just stayed really good. This mint right here is one of the peppermints. Yes, and as you see, it lost an awful lot of foliage just by being blown to pieces by the hurricane. And a lot of things happened that way too. Now this is even more aggressive than the lemon balm, so I have it nicely contained in a terracotta pot. This is one of those chimney flues, and I usually have 3 or 4 different mints, and I'm just down to 2 right now. So there's a chance to go ahead and plant some more. That's what I love about gardening. There's always time to plant another one. Now, I was talking to you about things that are going to survive into the winter and then again into the springtime. This is Dusty Miller, and it's a really pretty plant. It's got a lot of white and silver to it, very drought tolerant. And this is a great plant to plant if you wanted to go ahead and have a break between something red hot, orange hot, yellow hot to one of the cool colors. It's a nice transition. Or if you think the 2 colors might clash, you can go ahead and plant the Dusty Miller in between them. Or if you just want to have something that's going to sort of soften the garden or lighten the garden. This actually is a sort of a tender perennial, which means it doesn't last for 3 full years, but it will last almost 2 years and look very, very nice. So this will survive through the winter time. Now, if you come over here, I've got some geraniums. They're not going to survive. And this is annual vinca. And as soon as we have a hard frost, it's going to be toast. I've got my irises that are going to be bursting into bloom in the springtime. And I've got them all ready for it. I'm going to have to sort of separate them maybe next year. But here I have some snapdragons. And I love these guys because they bloom like crazy in the early spring. They bloom like crazy in the fall. But better than that is they actually survive over the winter. And as soon as it's nice, they're going to start blooming again. I have little grasshoppers here too. So what I'll have to do later on in the fall, after these die back, I'm going to have to cut these back to about an inch or so off the ground. But right now, while there's still a little bit of color, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. One other thing I wanted to share with you, what you can do in the garden this time of year, is if you have some container gardens, it's a good time to go ahead and clean it up. So let's take a look and see what we can do with them. You know, I love having containers in the summertime. I can put all kinds of beautiful things that will give you lots and lots of colors. This was a lantana. It had gorgeous flowers all through the summertime, but with a little bit of frost, it just kind of lost a lot of the flowers, and it's gone to berry, and it's really pretty much toast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redo the entire thing. I had a little self-watering thing. Sometimes this works, where you can go ahead and fill this up with water, put it in, and it works for a while. I'm going to put this down here for the time being so it doesn't get lost. With this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out the entire plant and just dump everything that's in here out. There we go. Now the reason why I'm doing that is I want to start out with new potting soil because I'm going to do some different things to it. This is really nice. It had great root system, but that would be really difficult to go ahead and do anything else to it. So what I'm going to try to do now is add some soil to this, and I'm going to add some bulbs to it also, and then I'm going to put something on top of it. If you leave a pot that has potting soil in with no plants at all, and you have friends that are smokers, they'll put their cigarettes out in the potting soil, and you know what's going to happen? That potting soil, which is a type of peat moss, will actually catch on fire. Houses have burned down with that. So anytime you have containers near your house, make sure you have some sort of plants in there so people will realize, oh, that's a live plant. I will not put my cigarette in that. Or just remove the pots totally and just clean it up for the winter. What I'm going to start out with first is some potting soil. And this is easy enough to just go ahead and add it. Now this potting soil is heavier than the type of soil that you use for seed starters. That is definitely the easiest way to do it. Okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and put some flowering bulbs in there. I can use tulips. Tulips are gorgeous. They have beautiful colors. Tulips will not last more than the springtime. So when they finish blooming, I'm actually going to have to pull these out and throw them away. There are crocuses also that I could add. These are beautiful, bright purple. The bulbs are very, very tiny. These can last forever. What I'll probably do is take them out of the pot in the springtime and put them in the yard. And then I also have some really pretty little daffodils. This is ice follies, and this is a tete-a-tete. Small ones, so they're more in proportion to the size of the container we have here. And I like to use the whites and the yellows, especially with the blue pot. Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to put your daffodils in because they are the largest of them all, and they need to grow down into the ground at least 7 or 8 inches. When you buy them from the store, they already have the flowers that are completely made inside the bulbs. So you want to plant them where the pointy top side is up. You can see the little basil area where the roots are. That's where the roots are. You want to have that down. And I'm going to go ahead and put them down into the ground like this. And I'm pretty much going to fill this whole pot. Oh, this is a neat one. This is one that's actually started to make a second flower. So I'll have 2 little flowers with that. The reason why you want to plant them as deep as 6 to 8 inches is the first year the flowers that are already there will come up. But the next year you actually need to have them down far enough so that they can go ahead and have the stability and get the nutrients in the soil that they need. And if you have them planted too high, they'll actually get sunburned and they just won't be able to grow as well. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and move this over here and plant that there. So I've got all my daffodils on the outside. And this is a pot within a pot, so there's going to be a lot of protection on that. If I just had the regular pot right out here, I would probably want to go ahead and plant them closer to the center so they wouldn't have to worry about that. I am going to plant some daffodils, excuse me, some tulips here too. And I guess I'll go ahead and plant the really wild tulips. These are parrot blends, which are lots of different colors. Whenever you get a blend like this, you're never sure exactly what you're getting, but they're fun. Tulips are a little bit different. They're softer looking, smoother looking, but you have the top and you also have the little basil part where the roots are right there. So I'm going to put them on the inside. Now, daffodils are poisonous, but tulips are not. So if you have a problem with voles, this might be the only choice that you have to get tulips to grow, is to plant them in containers. And then keep them as an annual, so you plant them in the fall and then you go ahead and get rid of them. So I've got a whole bunch of them. And if you look in here, you can see that I've got them very, very close together. And that's because this is a display planting, and I will go ahead and remove it after they're finished blooming. This is way, way too close if I wanted to leave it. And, but for a display, that's not bad at all. So I've got those done. Okay, I didn't put the tulips in quite as deep because they're smaller, but the daffodils went down the deepest. Now, let me go grab my trowel. There we go. All right, and now I'm going to go ahead and fill up this with some more potting soil. This is so much easier starting without a fresh pot like this. Okay. Almost, you want to get almost to the top. There we go. Now, the other thing you want to consider is, what are you going to plant on top of the pot as a plant? You could use something that's kind of fun. This is Swiss chard, and this is really pretty. So I could plant that in there, and that would be very pretty. Give me a lot of height and lots of color. Plus, this is edible, so I could eat it all winter. Or I could go ahead and stick with pansies. And I think I'm going to do with the pansies because I love the way they look. So I'm going to go ahead and put these off to the side for a second while I get the crocuses going. The crocuses are going to be a dark purple, so I've got to have yellow and white daffodils. And I'm going to have multicolored tulips and dark purple crocuses. They're not all going to bloom at the same time. Your crocuses come up first. And these are really tiny. These are actually not bulbs. These are called corms. Where you still have the top that's kind of pointy right there. And you have the basal root system right there. What happens with these guys is they bloom like this, and then at the very bottom, you get the new little bulbets coming up here. So I'm going to go ahead and just put them here around the outside. This is the easy way to do it. Just dump them in like this. Make sure that they're planted so the pointy end is up. And it's very, very easy to do. This is something you can do with your kids. And it doesn't take that much time. It's a lot of fun. And in the springtime, when everything blooms, it's absolutely going to be beautiful. And because they bloom at different times, it's not going to matter which one comes up first. But these guys will come up first. So get that one in there. Put that one right there. And then I'm going to add some more potting soil. To cover the crocuses. Crocuses only need about a ½ inch of soil. And this is a little bit more than a ½ inch, but I think that that'll still do well. And I could just leave it like that, but then again, if I have any friends that are smokers here, they're going to look at that as a good place to put their cigarette butts. So instead, I'll go ahead and plant some pansies. I love pansies. Pansies actually, a lot of people think that they live all summer long. Unfortunately, they don't. So what you have to do with pansies is you have to plant them either in the fall or in the springtime. And you want to break the roots up just a little bit, like that, and set it into the soil. So the crocuses will come up through the pansies. And then after that, the tulips will come up through the pansies. And after that, the daffodils will come up through the pansies. So it'll all be very, very pretty. Let's see, we'll put this over here. And I'm going to put one in the center. There we go. Okay? And then just water it in. It is that easy. There we go. Well, I hope you've enjoyed all the different things that I've showed what you can do in a November day. If it's beautiful, go outside and play in your garden. Oh, I do have one little thing I wanted to share with you. Right in front I have some different types of basils, and this is a Thai basil. It seems to be a little bit more winter hardy. All of my other basils have kind of turned brown and to brown mush, but these guys are a little bit more protected and they bloom like crazy. These you don't have to worry about pricking the flowers off. They're an ornamental, they're great in flower arrangements. They're great to use as an edible basil too, so it's kind of fun to have something like that. I can go ahead and clean them all up and they'll still come back up again next year from seed. So that's kind of a fun thing to do. So, okay, we've gone ahead and looked at trees, we've gone ahead and looked at peonies, we've gone ahead and looked at lawns, keeping your branches picked up, taking care of your leaves. There's a lot of fun things to do out in your garden. So thank you for joining me on Delmarva Gardens right here on Pack 14.